All right, I think we've passed 7 o'clock, so we'll get going now. So I just want to welcome everyone who's here. My name is Barbara Ray, and I'm on the Continuing Education Committee. We want to thank our speakers tonight, and our presentation, the Rhode Island Schools Recycling Club, is brought to you by the URI Master Gardeners, which is a part of the University of Rhode Island's Cooperative Extension. Next. So Cooperative Extension, if you go to their website, you will see that there are 5 areas: land stewardship, food systems and agriculture, water resources, energy efficiency, conservation, and renewables, and healthy lifestyles. Each one of those has publicly accessible information, and we encourage you all to go to the website. Next, please. This evening, we hope that you will enjoy our talk, and we ask you to enter your questions in the chat, and we will answer the questions at the end. So you may wish to check from time to time. Various participants may be logging additional information for you in the chat. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jason Tranchita, who will introduce our speakers for the evening.
Thanks, Barbara. I'm Jason Tranchita, also part of the Continuing Ed program. Just as a little intro, the Rhode Island Schools Recycling Club was created in 2001 in partnership with the Rhode Island Resource Recovery Corporation and the Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management to improve recycling in Rhode Island schools. At the time, the number of schools that were recycling was 76. That's about 18%, among the lowest in New England. When the program ended in 2007, the number of schools recycling was up to 286, or 68% of all schools. Results like this prove that change is possible. The Rhode Island Schools Recycling Club focuses on food waste in Rhode Island schools and how to reduce, recover, and recycle it. Our 2 speakers tonight are Jim Corwin and Warren Heyman. Jim Corwin is co-director of the Rhode Island Schools Recycling Club. He has 30 plus years of project and organizational management experience in Rhode Island as vice president and general manager of radio stations and a partner in a marketing, promotions, and events agency. Jim has coordinated Earth Day cleanups, promotions, and concerts in partnership with the Rhode Island DEM for 6 years, culminating in the 2000 Millennial Earth Day Festival at Goddard State Park. In 2001, he co-founded the award-winning Rhode Island Schools Recycling Club through a partnership with the Rhode Island Resource Recovery Corporation and the Rhode Island DEM to improve recycling in Rhode Island schools. Jim is a trained facilitator and implemented one of the first quality management programs in the radio industry from 1995 to 2007. In 2019, he led a project to measure food waste in Rhode Island schools with a grant from the Rhode Island Attorney General's office. Jim holds a bachelor's degree in economics from Union College and plays lead guitar for the Freewheelers, a folk blues and roots band. Next, we have Warren Heyman, who is the organizing director of Rhode Island Schools Recycling Club. Warren is also currently sort of retired. He worked for 40 years as an organizer and negotiator for the Hospitality Union Unite here in New England and throughout the US and Canada. Prior to that, he was a community organizer in Worcester and Chelsea, Mass. He teaches bargaining strategies to a variety of unions in LA, Vancouver, Philadelphia, and New Haven. Warren is married with 2 grown children and one of the founders of the Edgewood Patuxent Neighborhood Wildflower Buying Co-op. He's also a member of the Edgewood Waterfront Preservation Association, the Cranston Neighborhood Tree Program, and the Patuxent Green Revival Group. Jim, Warren, thanks for being here tonight, and I will stop sharing my screen and hand it over to you.
Right, so folks, please just put any questions you have into the chat.
Okay, let me just go back and make sure I am sharing this properly. It says optimize for video clip. There we go. Okay. From the beginning. All right. So Again, my name is Jim Corwin, and I'm the co-director of the Rhode Island Schools Recycling Club. And I'm going to start tonight by giving you some background on, how we put this together and what we've been up to. And then Warren is going to take you through right into some of our schools with photographs and describe how we work with schools. And then at the end of the presentation, we're going to give you some of the stats about how much food that we have diverted from the landfill, recovered and donated to hungry people. And also our biggest goal is how much we are preventing food waste from happening in the first place. So here we go. As you all know, I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here, but Americans waste way too much food. And at the risk of being boring, I do like to repeat just some statistics. And these are the resources that we use in the United States to produce food that we are wasting. 140 million acres of agricultural land. That's about the size of California and New York combined. 5.9 trillion gallons of blue water. That's equal to the annual water use of 50 million American homes. And I think Lake Mead would like to have that water right now. It uses 664 billion kilowatts of energy. That's enough power to produce, to power more than 50 million US homes. And it produces 170 metric tons of CO2 gas emissions. And that is comparable to the emissions of 42 coal-fired power plants. And that is the food that's used to produce the food we waste. And you add to that, when you take this food and you put it in a landfill, and food is the largest component of what we put in landfills, 34%, we have to bury it so it doesn't smell. And when you take it away from oxygen and you bury it and you cover it with plastic, it produces methane, which is a gas that is many, many, many times more potent than carbon dioxide. And then, you add, I don't want to continue too much further, but I think it bears repeating that all of those resources go into producing food that we waste. And it's almost like a farce. And of course, to make it a farce, 1 in 4 families in Rhode Island are food insecure at this point. And actually, in some of the communities we're working in the inner city, it's more like 1 in 3 families. So when I did the assessment in 2019 of how much food waste is coming out of Rhode Island schools, we did 15 food waste audits in elementary, middle, and high schools. We did 3 different districts. We did urban districts, rural districts, and suburban districts. And our numbers revealed that the schools in Rhode Island, the public schools, produce about 2,500 tons every school year that they ship off to the landfill. That's the weight of 300 elephants and produces 937 metric tons of CO2. The thing that probably surprised me and the most was the amount of perfectly good food that was going to the landfill. This is high value food: milk, yogurt, cheese, bananas, apples, orange, pears, baby carrots, granola bars. And with some of the food rescue organizations we've been working with, the way that they equate tons of recovered food to meals, they say that would produce about 600,000 meals over the course of the school year. So we were able, with our good friends at the Rhode Island DEM, who became our mentors, they helped us apply for a Healthy Community Grant from the EPA. And we started that in 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, to work with 4 schools to develop some solutions. And we produced a food waste toolkit, and we went into schools, and we were lucky to work with a variety of really good players like the Rhode Island Healthy Schools Coalition and other folks who do a wonderful job in schools. And they directed us to the schools where there were teachers who were passionate about this, because that's an important consideration. So when we go to a school, we create awareness about food waste. I should stop there. We go to a school, we actually get agreement with the principal to do the school, and we administer a survey measuring attitudes and behavior of students before we say anything about food waste with regard to recycling. The attitudes and behaviors about the environment and recycling. And then, of course, after the program has been up and running for a year, we had re-administered the survey so we can see what kind of behavioral and attitude changes we're able to create. We involve all key stakeholders. Any person at a school whose functional area is impacted by our program, we want to meet and we want to ask their input about how we can make this work. Custodians are as important to us as principals. They help us set up the sorting stations, they get the bins that we need, and they are ultimately going to be the custodians of the process. But we meet with faculty, and we meet with cafeteria monitors and food service workers and students and parents. Those are our stakeholders. That's our school community. We train students to monitor sorting stations in elementary schools. We have cafeteria rangers, and in middle schools, we call them green team captains. We set up share tables, and we capture all of that food that was going into the landfill before, and we donate surplus food either within the school community or in a food pantry in the school's community. And then we work on strategies to reduce the amount of food that gets wasted. We have a measure called food waste per student. I created a baseline in 2019 when I did the audits, and our goal, in line with the EPA's goal, is to reduce food waste per student by 50% by 2026. We're going to try to do it 4 years before the EPA gets to their number. And I did want to ask a poll question here. Now that I've spoken a little bit about elementary, middle, and high schools, what students do you think waste the most food in the lunchroom? High schoolers, middle schoolers, or elementary schoolers?
Okay.
And the elementary, elementary school is correct. It is the elementary students who waste the most food, in large part, closely followed by middle schools. High schools, believe it or not, waste very little comparatively because they have so much more choice. And I think one of the things we found when we were doing the food waste audits, when I weighed an elementary school meal and I compared it to a high school meal, the weight was comparable. And in general, we put too much food on the trays of elementary and middle school students, and we can talk about that a little bit more later. But thank you. That's great. Okay, next slide. Let's see. For some reason, my slides are not functioning now. Let's see. Can I go down one more slide? There we are. So, Warren, you're going to take it from here.
No, it may be. There we go. Okay. So we're showing the slide of the trash bin.
Yeah, now we're going to talk about what happens when we go into a school.
Okay. So to take everybody back to your days as an elementary or middle school student, basically what normally happens before Jim and I show up is we have these big gray bins in the school, and everybody comes into the cafeteria and they go through the line, and the beautiful lunch ladies pile the food on their tray, and then they go to their tables, and most students don't realize that the purpose of lunch is to eat. They think the purpose of lunch is to socialize. So there's very little eating, unfortunately, that goes on. And then when they're done eating, as you can see in this slide, everything gets thrown into the trash, everything on the tray. So you can see right here, there's 3 unopened milk containers and a bunch of food waste and the trays and plastic and everything else. So everything gets thrown in there. In one school we were in, the custodians told us that they get 36 bags of trash in a week out of the cafeteria. This is another example of what we found, which is that's a beautiful recycle bin with all beautiful recycling there. Unfortunately, at that school, it's wrapped in a plastic bag. So when it gets to the landfill, as you know, Madison will know, that it gets rejected because you can't send recycling wrapped in plastic. Doesn't work. They won't accept it. It gets rejected. Next slide, please. And then this is another thing that we see often is that the trash haulers are not doing their job properly. And so we get there and the bins in the back are full and overflowing and there's stuff all over the ground, etc. Okay, Mr. Corlin. Okay, so we come in, as Jim described, and we kind of come in from the underground. We don't go to the superintendent of the school district. We actually try to reach out to somebody who's on the PTO or involved in their neighborhood school and get a meeting with the principal. And then we explain to the principal that we have this great program which will train students to be leaders, dramatically reduce the amount of food waste going on in their cafeteria, and get their recycling program back on track. And most of the principals that we meet with are like, that's great, because everybody, whether it's principals, food service workers, teachers, or custodians, is outraged about the amount of food that's wasted. Unfortunately, they're all overwhelmed with what they're doing, so they don't really know like how to attack the problem. But Jim and I come in and we say, look, we're going to do all the heavy lifting and we're going to set up a sorting station. So and this is, I'm going to take you through the sorting station. I should say also, as Jim said, so we talk with everybody, the food service operate companies, Sodexo, Aramark, or Chartwells, the principals, the teachers, we go to a faculty meeting, we go to the PTO meeting, we work, of course, with the students. So we buy a refrigerator, there it is on the left, and then we get, as you'll see, going from the left to the right. Well, I'm going to actually go on the right. Let's start on the right. So you'll see a little table and there's a cooler on the table. So that's the share table. So we buy a cooler. The school gives us a little table. We buy a freeze pack, which we put into the cooler. And as the students come down the line, going from the right to the left, all healthy, edible food that is sitting on their tray gets taken off their tray. So the unopened milks, the unopened juice boxes, the bananas, the oranges, the cheese sticks that are sealed in plastic. We grab those, we put them into the cooler right away, so there's no issue on spoilage. And then the next thing over, which has that big, large collar on it, which is a dog collar, believe it or not, that's the liquid bucket. So half-drunk milks, half-drunk juices, water, any liquid that the kids are done with, they pour off into that 5-gallon bin there, bucket there. Then the next step over that the kids go is recycle. So that's the recycle bucket. It's a beautiful blue recycle. We got Resource Recovery's label right on it. So the milk cartons, the juice cartons, water bottles, if kids come in with sandwiches from home wrapped in aluminum foil, if they're not dirty, we'll take those as well. They all go into the recycling bin. Then next is the trash can. So if there's trash on there, but not food waste, trash, they toss it there. And then you'll see that bootstrap bucket, which has a compostable liner. So all food waste, including, chicken nuggets, anything that's food, goes into that bucket. And we have a contract with Hauler Bootstrap Compost, which has an aerobic digester right there in Johnston. So, and then the last thing the kids do is they put their trays on that tray just to the right of that bootstrap bucket, so that all the trays are neatly stacked. And then at the end of the meal, two things happen. All of the food that's in the cooler gets immediately moved to the refrigerator, and the trays get put into the trash bin. We're also employing some other strategies. For instance, the cafeteria aide may go into the refrigerator. If there's a lot of food in there, they take it out, they put it on a tray, they wait till the kids are halfway through lunch, and then they work the room. Who wants an extra milk? Who wants an extra juice? Who wants an apple or an orange, whatever we have. And we're able to, initially we were sending food to some food pantries, but now because there's so many food insecure kids in these schools, we're getting the food back out to the children. Next slide, please. So Jim mentioned the cafeteria rangers. So those children on the right, this is the Leviton Dual Language School in Providence, this particular slide, and those youngsters on the right-hand side, those are the rangers that we recruit and train. And one is the share table ranger, one is the liquid bucket ranger, one is the recycle ranger, the next one is the trash ranger, then you have the compost ranger, and then you have the tray ranger. And then the last person you see in the picture is a woman named Ludmila Garcia, and she is a member of the PTO, and she's volunteering her time to come in occasionally and help, help us with the kids. Next slide, please. This is MLK school. And again, on the right-hand side, you see the rangers, the students on the left-hand side, the rangers, we give badges, so they feel, it's an important leadership role.
And job descriptions.
And job descriptions, right? And you'll see in the back right-hand corner, that's the refrigerator. Often the schools have an after-school program in the lunchroom, And so a lot of kids who are there and are hungry, we put up a big sign in English and Spanish, free food, take what you want. And we had one school where the computer science teacher came in the morning, took all the fruits and vegetables, put them in a fruit bowl in her class, and then told the students if they would eat, if they could take whatever they wanted as long as they ate it. And we've got a little video about this. And she feels that as a result of the kids eating in her class, they were more attentive, less distracted, and she thinks the grades will probably be better. Next slide, please. Here again, we are at the dual language. And again, you can see all the rangers in the back and the PTO woman at the end, and all the trays are nicely stacked. Remember, before we get there, they would generate 30 bags of trash in a week, in part because they take everything and they just throw it in. There's a lot of air in there. Everything is all willy-nilly packed away, on top of each other. When we have the kids go through and sort their trash like this, it dramatically reduces the amount of trash that goes to the landfill. We think somewhere between 80 and 90% reduction in a school that we're in. Next slide, please. So some schools have 5 rangers, some schools have a few less. We assume that every school is unique, and so we really solicit input from the students, the parents, the custodians, the food service workers, the teachers, the administrators, et cetera. Everybody participates. We have some rangers who have learning differences, and they fit right in with everybody else. Next slide, please. And it's fun, particularly in elementary schools. The kids, I don't want to say fight with each other, but we have no problem getting kids to volunteer to be rangers. Some kids are disappointed after 2 or 3 weeks when we tell them, look, we gotta get the next group of kids in here because everybody has to have a turn on it. In the middle school, it's a little more challenging, but and even the assistant principals can get into the act. That woman on the left is the assistant principal at Martin Luther King Elementary School. And again, you can see the nice, the trays are all stacked up. So then we add a little order to the whole situation. This is the Bootstraps tote, and all of the compostables, food, everything is nice in a compostable bag. We think we actually are probably going to reduce the amount of rodent problems that are in some of these schools. Next slide, please. Here's an example of the amount of food that we capture. And again, we pay, particularly with the milk, they all have a date on them. So if it's expired, then of course we pour it out, recycle the container. But we're able to pretty quickly move the food. In some of the schools, at the end of the 3 meal periods, we just take all the milks and give it back to the food service workers. They put it back in the refrigerators, and then they hand it out again the next day. And we're very careful about, and we do a lot of training about proper food safety and food handling.
Okay, now we have poll question number 2.
Okay. Can you put it up there, Jim? Or somebody?
I think Jason's going to do that.
Okay.
True or false, according to the National School Lunch Program, a nutritious, reimbursable school lunch must have all 5 components: a meat or a meat alternative, grain, fruit, vegetable, and milk.
All right, so let's wait 1 minute while everybody, runs to Google, finds out the answer, and then puts it in. Oh, there we go. All right. That's actually, it's not true. It's false, right, Jim? Well, Jim, you should respond to this one.
Yeah, it is false, and it is a common misunderstanding. But in order to have a nutritious, reimbursable school lunch, you must have 3 components, provided that one is a fruit or a vegetable. And so many lunch ladies and folks who work in the cafeteria don't understand that, especially in elementary schools. They think milk is mandatory, and that's one of the reasons that we have the huge amount of waste we have in elementary schools, in particular in middle schools. And so we are working hard with our food service providers, who are well aware of this, on something called offer versus serve, which is an approach to both elementary and middle schoolers to say, take what you are going to eat and don't take what you're not going to eat. And you don't have to take a milk, provided that you have 3 out of the 5 elements, and that one of those is either a fruit or a vegetable.
Okay. Okay. And as I mentioned earlier, here's the refrigerator with the bilingual sign on it. And again, we encourage, kids to take food if they're hungry, out of the refrigerators.
And in many schools, we are changing the policies that have prevented food from being served anywhere outside of a cafeteria, because if you want fruit and vegetables to get eaten in schools, serve it to them when it's about 10:30 in the morning and they haven't had breakfast and they are starving and can't even think about anything. And so we're having less and less recoverable food in these schools. We don't need to take them to food pantries anymore because it's getting consumed by the students, which is the best.
Okay. And again, everybody's involved. We did an award ceremony at Nathan Bishop. And the woman on the far right is the science teacher who's overseeing the program. The three kids in front of her are some of the captains from that school. You see the women in blue. Those are the food service workers. The folks behind them are the custodians. The woman on the far left is the EPA person for this region. The next woman next to her is Maura Delgado from the Resource Recovery, who's been very helpful with us. And then the guys in the back on the right are some of the parents that have been involved. So we do an award ceremony to recognize everybody. Everybody in this picture got an award on that day. No, that's okay. Next slide. Okay. And then we try to make the program as educational as possible. So one of the aspects is math. And so we weigh everything. That woman in the middle is the science teacher in North Providence at the Birchwood Middle School. We had just done a zero waste day to try to educate all of the kids, and then working with the food service company to see if we could have a day that generated no waste in the lunchroom. And so that's Jim, and her name is Katie Bauer, and a young child student. And they're weighing the liquid bucket to see how much liquid. And then with the science teacher, they're learning about division and algebra and different ways to convert what we're doing and how much methane are we not putting in the atmosphere, et cetera.
And Zero Waste Day was a huge success. We're trying to get a 50% reduction in food waste per student. And that day, I think there was 0.003 pounds per student. It was a huge success. I mean, we had their favorite meal. We did a lot of planning, and the students did surveys, and they did posters and table tents. So by the time we came into Zero Waste Day, everybody knew what the goals were. And we had some good prizes. We had tickets to the Museum of Science in Boston, to the Mystic Aquarium, and we had a variety of T-shirts and other things. I think next time we're going to have to get more prizes, though. There must have been 200 kids who produced absolutely no waste. Oh, and I have another poll question, but I think you've already answered this one, Warren. This one is the third poll question. And this question is, by recovering perfectly good food, pouring off liquids, diverting mixed recyclables and food scraps, the amount of lunchroom waste going to the landfill is reduced by 40 to 50%, 60 to 70%, 80 to 90%.
Well, I guess, Jim, we're going to see whether or not anybody's paying any attention to what I'm saying. And the winner is?
Oh, very good.
All right.
Well, that's a tie, but everybody got the point. We are doing a great job of reducing the amount of trash, waste going to the landfill. And
the answer is between 80 and 90%. So that 45%, you guys got it right.
Yep, that's great.
Okay. So, and again, as I mentioned, we're doing a lot of things to try to, educate the kids about waste. Both, trash waste and food waste. So this was one of the signs that the art teacher working with the students at that school in North Providence, they put up, plastered all the halls with Zero Waste Day. And then this is an example again of these are two captains and their science teacher, and that's the director of the Rhode Island DEM, who had just given out awards both to the school. That school is Nathan Bishop in Providence. They had since last April, I think, they diverted 4 tons of waste from the landfill, including 900 pounds of perfectly healthy edible food. So it was quite an accomplishment. Next slide. And then, we take everybody up to the landfill. This is their education center, and it's a bus trip, which we fund. And then we take all the captains and the rangers to the landfill, and then one of their educators gets on the bus. The bus then goes, all the way up to the top. So everybody gets to see what's involved. If you haven't done it, I highly recommend it. It's extremely impressive. Once the weather gets warmer, they actually have bus trips every Saturday morning, so you can sign up online for that. And then after the bus trip, we come back to the education center where there's a presentation about recycling, and then they can look at the huge recycling facility that's right behind that wall there, and actually see it working. And also as part of this, we got one of the the resource recovery educators to come, and we have been retraining all of the custodians and all of the faculty, because as I showed you earlier, they're not recycling properly in the schools. And the state of Rhode Island we've got a problem. The landfill is going to be full shortly. And plus we could be generating a lot of money, millions of dollars, from the sale of some of these materials. Next slide, please. Okay. And as I commented, we have, rangers and captains of all ages. We try to figure out how everybody can fit in from first grade, right through 8th grade. Next slide, please. And then this, again, as I mentioned, this was the school. Those are all the captains and their science teacher. The guy all the way on the right is one of the PTO leaders who's involved in this program. And we had just done a big school ceremony to present the awards. A pandemic slowed us down some, but if the kids were in school, then we were in school as well, and tried to make the program successful. And I should add, back to you, Jim. But before I say, I just want to say, and we are working closely with the food service companies in trying to figure out strategies to reduce waste. We got Sodexo and Providence agreed to replace all their plastic water cups, 1 million plastic water cups, with paper. And they're now going to eliminate all their little ketchup packets and mustard packets and go to pump bags. Oh, poll question.
Oh, yeah, that's great. I forgot about this poll question. And so this is a good one. Which of the following items belong in mixed recycling? Which ones belong in recycling? Well, that's pretty good. We've got the correct answers are juice boxes and aluminum foil. Plastic bags do not belong in mixed recycling, nor do plastic spoons and forks. So that was our 4th poll question. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our 7 schools here. Raymond LaPerche Elementary School up in Smithfield was our first elementary school. And these are the 2nd grade cafeteria rangers. And Bootstrap Compost always tells me that their compost is the least contaminated of any compost. I mean, we occasionally get those little ketchup packages or a little piece of one in our compost. We're very good, but these students are the best. And they have already donated. They were one of the first schools. They started in the fall of 21, and they've already diverted 7 tons. Birchwood Middle School was our first real school. In our first middle school, they've diverted 7.4 tons and donated 1,028 pounds to the St. Thomas Church in North Providence. And now they're actually redistributing the food within the school. And that's their school garden. They also have a greenhouse and a really good gardening program. This is the Rhodes Elementary School. They started with us last spring. They've diverted at this point 4.7 tons. We took a lot of food out of here initially because there was a problem with the yogurts. Nobody wanted to eat the yogurts. And we donated a lot of food. And then we did a taste test with a local yogurt company, Narragansett Creamery. And it was a huge success. We're still working on changing the yogurt with the food service provider. We haven't given up yet. We're hoping to get that done. This is Nathan Bishop Middle School. Warren's talked a lot about this. This is This is the sorting station. They've already diverted over 4 tons. I haven't updated this, sorry. And they're the ones who were the first to do a wonderful job of redistributing food to the students outside of the classroom. And here, Warren, along with the folks at Bootstrap and one of the members of the PTO, are taking compost from our program, and they are putting together the gardens that were not tended to during the pandemic, and they filled them up with wildflowers and pollinators.
And I'd like to add also, at that school, we got, I gave them a compost bin. So they're doing their own composting as well. And then a parent also built raised beds. So they've got a couple of raised beds in the back. And then also, because of the activity there, the city of Providence is giving them 10 trees to plant this spring. And so we'll be getting compost donated back from Bootstrap to use in the planting of those 10 trees, which will be done by the science teacher and her class that are leading the program. This is Vartan Gregorian. You saw some pictures of them earlier. They also, I gave them another compost bin, and they have a spring cleanup day. So Bootstrap gives every school 200 pounds of compost each year that participates in our program for free. Almost all of the schools accept it, and they use it to refurbish their beds, and there's a lot of focus now on native pollinators and getting those going. So it's really one big circle.
And this is MLK, which is another one of our big elementary schools that we started this year in the second round of funding. This was our second Healthy Communities grant from the EPA. Took us from 4 to 8 schools. And they have already diverted 2.4 tons. And they do have a local food pantry in a nearby church, and they're taking most of the food to that pantry right now. And we just finished launching in the Leviton Dual Language School in Providence, and they're at 0.5 ton diverted and 192 pounds redistributed. And I will also say that in each of these schools, over the course of time, food waste per student goes down. At this point, food waste per student is down 23% in all of our schools on an average, which is, one of our proudest accomplishments, because that means we are preventing food waste from happening in the first place.
But so the goal is to not, I just want to add, Jim, to be really clear. The goal is to get kids to eat as much food as possible, good food, healthy food, not to, get them to take less food. But also to encourage them not to take something that they're not going to eat. And working with the leadership of the schools, we're trying to come up with strategies of how to encourage kids to, not spend the entire lunch period, which is about 30 minutes, socializing, but actually spend some of the time eating so that they can, have healthy bodies and healthy minds.
So we take all of those food scraps and we turn it into nutritious compost. We take all of that recoverable food and we redistribute it to folks who need it. And our goals and objectives for the remainder of this second grant is to continue to involve students in all of these activities. And we also have some promotions with Bootstrap where we offer all the families of the schools a 2-month discount or introductory offer for curbside pickup of compost or food scraps. And so we're hoping to take some of this knowledge and these behavior changes home. By the end of this school year, we will have diverted 35 tons of food waste away from the landfill for composting and recovered 2 tons of perfectly good food for redistribution. And our goal is, with our next grant, is to scale the program up to 30 schools and by 2025, and make it accessible to all schools. We're working on a train the trainer process. We're going to bring a facilitator or 2 facilitators in, and we're going to make this something where facilitators can continue to train other facilitators. And our goal, again, overarching goal, is to reduce food waste per student by 50% by 2025.
Jim, if I could also add, we forgot to mention, so last year, the legislature passed a law that requires 2 things. One is for the resource recovery to do a waste audit of every school every 3 years. And secondly, to require every school in the state, or almost every school in the state, to have a food waste diversion program. unfortunately, that law is it's an unfunded mandate, and there's no penalty for not doing it. At this point, Jim and I have to basically talk people into doing it. We think there may be some schools that are doing it here or there, but we don't think anybody is doing it at the level that this is being done. We're hoping that by modeling this, and this is a very low-tech program, to set up that sorting line is under $800. And on an ongoing basis, it's probably $1,500 in terms of the compostable gloves and the compostable liners and the compost hauling fees. So it's very affordable. But at this point, we have to persuade people that this is a good thing for them to do in their schools.
And this is just one last slide about, the impact that we've had since the beginning of the program. And so all of our schools together to this point have diverted 30.5 tons. And, the conversion rate on that converts to 12.5 metric tons of CO2. Food waste prevented, 5.6 tons. We calculate that by a reduction in food waste per student. And of course, when you prevent food waste, it has a much greater impact with regard to reducing metric tons of CO2. And so our total greenhouse gas reduction to date is 28.2 metric tons of CO2. That's the equivalent of 6.1 gasoline-powered vehicles driven for a year. It's not huge, but we are just getting warmed up. And 5.1 tons of perfectly good, high-value food recovered, which is the equivalent of 8,532 meals. And this is Warren's slide.
Yeah, these young, these are future scientists. They're all showing you their certificate. They're the captains at Nathan Bishop. So hopefully there's some future scientists and comrades of Greta Thunberg. And I always tell people, don't more organize and compost.
So that is the extent of our presentation, Jason. If you want to kind of take the screen back, and you might want to finish with your 2 slides, and we're happy to answer any questions that anybody might have.
Sure. Barbara, did you have any questions? Or I've compiled a couple here from the...
Yes, there's a lot of great questions in the chat. So that slide that Jason just put up was if you're interested in becoming a URI Master Gardener. Maybe you could put that slide back, Jason, for a second.
There we go.
Okay, so this is our contact information. I don't know if there was one slide before or after that, Jason. And so you can find other gardening resources on these websites. We do have a gardening hotline. You can call or email their questions, and we would love to hear from you. So now I hope that you will type your questions in the chat, and I'm going to read them out for our speakers. I want to say how impressed I am. If I heard this right, this is only about 8 schools, and the amount that you've managed to recycle and repurpose, I think, is astounding. So the first comment we had was from Madison Burke-Hindle, who's with the Rhode Island Resource Recovery, and you folks can follow along in the chat. You can contact her or go to the Resource Recovery's website at info@riric.org to find out how you can, they have very reasonable, about $45 compost bins if your school wants to start. Another viewer is recommending yard sales and clothing swaps as other good recycling activities. So our first question is, are there any fears, real or imagined, of liabilities associated with diverting good food to other consumers?
So I'll answer that question. It's a great question. And, one of the things we didn't talk about was part of our training for the cafeteria rangers and the green team captains are safe food handling guidelines for share tables. And a woman named, I can't remember her name, I'm sorry, but put together these guidelines. She worked hard with the Department of Health and the Department of Education to put together guidelines and safe food handling guidelines for share tables. And so we follow those to the T. And there is also federal legislation, the Bill Emerson Act, which prevents liability from donating food to a nonprofit. And there's also two pieces of legislation locally that were laws passed in Rhode Island that do the same. So there's very little chance of being sued successfully if you have donated food and something goes wrong with something you donated and people get sick.
One person made an interesting comment. Maybe the kids would eat more if they had longer lunchtime. And another person, you address the next one, that the only way that this works is if you have monitors stand by the bins. So the monitors eat lunch and then they go to the bins. Is that how it works?
Yeah.
Yes, the cafeteria. Go ahead, Warren.
I was going to say, yeah. So the cafeteria rangers get to cut the line. They get to go first. And then in most schools, they don't, if it's about a 30-minute lunch period, they eat lunch, and then about halfway through the lunch period, then they come to the sorting stations and get everything ready. And then with 10 minutes left, usually whoever's responsible for the cafeteria starts to say, okay, this table, you guys can go up to the sorting stations, and it's controlled that way.
So Debbie Vine Smith says there's April 26, 2023 is Stop Food Waste Day, and she cites a website, and maybe everyone can have an activity at their school for Stop Food Waste Day.
That's a great idea.
And a next question was, do you talk to the food service provider?
Yes. So Sodexo has a sustainability person, a woman named Kelly DeAngelis, and we work very closely with her. I don't know if the other two companies do. We currently have the most schools involved in Providence, being that's the biggest city, and that's where Sodexo is, which is where Kelly works. So, but we try to gently push them to get them to try to come up with effective strategies, both on the meals, what they're serving the kids. Although there seems to, at least my impression is, a fair amount of interaction between the food service provider and either the school committee often has a food service committee or something like that. So, but they are anxious to work with us, and we're coming up with strategies to try to figure out how to make the program better.
Yeah,
we have another couple questions about the amount of time that the kids have for lunch. The first is, do you recommend to the schools that they try to implement increased seat time at lunch for students as another way to reduce waste? And what do you think is the average amount of time that the kids do actually get for lunch?
I'll answer that question because when I was researching and creating this toolkit, that was a common thought, that we're just not giving students enough time. But having been in cafeterias now for 3 years, I'm not sure that they need much more time. I can't say definitively that would really reduce food waste, but that's only my observation. I think in general, there are studies. I think Harvard did a study that said if you do elongate the lunch period by 10 minutes, you get something like a 17% reduction in food waste. So I do think there's some benefit to it, but I don't think personally that the lunch periods are too short. I don't know. What do you think, Warren?
Yeah, I mean, first off, let me just say, I'm not an expert in child nutrition or in how much time the kids should be spending in the cafeteria. There are other people who've spent a lot of time. So we're working with what we find, which is all the schools have 30 minutes, as far as I think I can tell. And we're trying to figure out ways to make it as cool as possible for kids to eat. At Barton Gregorian, it's very interesting. The art teacher is the person who runs the second and third lunch period. And halfway through the lunch period, he's got a microphone and he says, okay, he says this every day. Okay, my friends, we're halfway through lunch. So stop talking now and pay attention and start to eat your, what's on your plate, because we only have 15 more minutes left and everybody's going to have to spend the last 5 minutes, sorting what's left. So please eat your food. And then he's the guy who goes and gets the food that we've captured already from the refrigerator, puts it in a big tray, and then he walks the room and says, I've got milks or juices, or I've got yogurts. Who wants what? And he pretty much, and he also goes back into the kitchen and he says, so do you have any hamburgers that are left over, or hot dogs, or whatever it was they cooked that day? Blueberries. And then he walks the room and is pretty effective at getting all of that food out into the kids. So it's not my field. I don't know whether it should be more time or less time, but I'm sure there are smarter people than me that could get that answer for you.
Okay, next question. One person comments that lunch should be a time for socialization. It sounds like in your schools, the kids do plenty of talking while they're eating.
Yes.
The comment, an interesting comment is, up in Maine, food also goes to the bus drivers.
Oh, great.
Yeah. We do say to the school, look, we know that there's a lot of people in your school community that are food insecure. And, so however we can get this food to those people that need it, we should do that. So some schools do these backpack programs where they go to the refrigerator and they fill the backpacks with food so that it's less obvious that some kids are food insecure, so they can, not be socially ostracized. But, it didn't occur to us, but that, if we've got a lot of food left over, there probably are bus drivers who are also food insecure, or have got kids at home that they could be feeding.
Next question. Is or could composting be added to the system to reduce landfill of compostable items? And this might be a way, I don't know if any of your schools have URI master gardeners, but maybe they could be informed that you have this source of composting, and that could be added into the school lessons and into the school gardens.
I think once we go into a school and we start composting, they are naturally asking questions about, well, what about gardens and school gardens? And most of our schools want to do school gardens, even if they have raised beds that haven't been touched in years. And so I do think that once we go in and we start this kind of work, it really would be natural to have a master gardener accompany us or follow us up and take the compost that we give to each school and do something with it. So I think we should talk more about that. I think there's a real opportunity to introduce gardening to more schools.
So if any of the viewers are interested in talking to URI about the school master gardener program, you can A, take the course, or B, you can contact us and get more information about the school garden mentor program. A question about the compost bins. How are the compostable materials composted? Locally at schools, or are there companies that pick up the compostable materials? And who's paying for that? I assume it's the school that has the contract.
Well, so in our grant, so we're contracting with a company called Bootstrap Compost. We put it out to competitive bid, and then they were the cheapest. And so through our grant, we sign a contract for the first year or so of the hauling. There are some of the schools are Birchwood, Barton Gregorian, and Nathan Bishop are also doing some composting on their campuses. Two of those schools we gave bins to, and the third school has their own 3 bins actually. So our feeling is that the city will be able to renegotiate their trash hauling contracts with Mega or Patriot, which is the companies that most of them have to haul the trash, because we're going to reduce the amount of trash by 80%. So they should be able to reduce a reduction in that cost, which would then be some of that would be used to pay the trash haul, the compost hauling that contracts that we have with Bootstrap.
I think you answered this before, but maybe you could repeat does the composting service, Bootstrap, do they provide free compost to the schools? And maybe that's a way to get more schools interested.
Yes, so they do. I did answer that. So they give each school 200 pounds worth of compost each year that we're running the program. So, and they're also, if we are interested, we can also take students to their facility off Killingly Road in Johnston so that students could actually see the digester that they use as well. So, but we definitely get compost from them. We're using it on rejuvenating some of the flower beds, and then some of the schools have raised beds. We just this morning met with the leadership at Fogarty Elementary School in South Providence, and they have a big area with a bunch of raised beds, and they're very excited about getting a compost and working with both the community people in that area, as well as with the students on both growing pollinators and fruits and vegetables.
Of the schools that you work with, are any of them actively composting now and using that for their school gardens?
Yes, Birchwood had a workshop with Bootstrap, and Bootstrap built them a 3-bin composting system because, you want the kids to be able to do something every time they go out there. Sometimes if you only have a 1-bin system, you have to leave it. You can't touch it for, a couple of weeks. And so they are composting kitchen scraps at Birchwood, and they're using that in their garden.
Interesting. So the next question is, how does this program work with the people in the back of the house, the kitchens? Is there any resistance from the kitchen workers to complying?
No, it's very interesting. Well, 2 things about the back of the house. A little story. We have a little pamphlet. If anybody wants an electronic version of the pamphlet, if you email me, we'll send it to you. So we sent a copy of our pamphlet to the superintendent of schools in Providence, and who we didn't have a relationship with. This was just, we thought, well, let's send him this pamphlet. He got the pamphlet. It does say on the front page of the pamphlet that starting in January of 2023, most Rhode Island schools will be required to develop a process to divert food waste and recover surplus food. So he picked up the phone and called Sodexo, which is their contractor, and said to Sodexo, I see here on January 1, we have to have this program. So what are you doing? And the person from Sodexo said, that's a good point. Let me get back to you. And then called back in 30 minutes and said, as of January 1, we will be having compost buckets in the back of the house, in our kitchens, in all of the middle schools, high schools, and production centers. So that was a pretty big move just off me mailing or us mailing him the leaflet. But one of the things, as Jim said earlier, when we get to a school, we talk to everybody in a respectful manner. We treat them with dignity, and we explain that their opinions matter, that this program will only be successful if everybody, whether you're a custodian or a food service worker or a teacher or a teacher's aide or a student or an administrator, we want everybody to be empowered to have input. And we try, when we do meetings, Jim and I just recently did a meeting, and we insisted, this was that dual language, that the custodian should be in the meeting, the principal should be in the meeting, the math teacher who's assigned to oversee the program, and the head cook from the kitchen. And we all sat at the table as equals and talked about how's the program going and what can we do to make the program better. And it's very interesting. At that school, we don't normally run this program during breakfast because it's a little bit of a reach for us to figure out how to do breakfast. But the custodian at that school was so turned on by the program that he on his own is capturing all of the edible, healthy food that was going into the trash, getting all the kids to put it on a table. He's putting it in the ice box. And then he's getting them to recycle the stuff that's still recyclable. So we talk to the food service workers, we engage them. Their ideas are important to us, and that's how we're building the program.
What school system was it you said again that has the compost bins?
North Providence at Birchwood Middle School. Well, so they have 3 bins, and then there's also a bin at Varton Gregorian, which is in Providence, and also one at Nathan Bishop Middle School in Providence.
Next question. Is this only K-12, or does it also apply to colleges and universities?
Well, we only work with K-12 because K-8, because that's where most of the food waste is. And, we're so lucky to work with these young people because we have a chance of changing behavior. And so even though it's only 6% of all food waste happens in public schools, it's such an important group of people. And so I don't know about colleges and universities. I do believe they have to comply as well, provided that they produce the tonnage that is outlined in the statute. And so I believe that is 30 tons per year. And I would be surprised if any of the big universities in Providence or in the area do not produce that much. I'm sure they do.
And we would be happy to work with anybody. We can't necessarily say that we can put the kind of time and energy into it that we are in the schools that we're working in, but we would certainly sit down with any group of faculty or students or food workers at any of the universities in the state and show them what we're doing and try to help set the program up.
Well, we'll be winding up soon. So if anybody else has a few final questions, please type them in the chat now. You're getting a lot of thank yous.
Thank
Warren Heyman has put his information, his contact information in the chat if you're interested in that. A lot of people are saying they're very glad that you're working on this program, and thank you. Here's another question. Can we also work on the quality of school lunch breakfast program so kids actually enjoy eating the food they got from the school and discarding at the recycling station, which creates more manpower time?
Jim, you want to comment about the taste testing? Yes. I will comment that, Farm to School Rhode Island and the Healthy Schools Coalition, the Rhode Island Healthy Schools Coalition, helped us put together a taste testing with a local yogurt. I think I mentioned this earlier. And hands down, the local yogurt really won that battle. And we have recently had some encouraging meetings at the Department of Education with the nutrition coordinator, whose name is Jessica Petrolia, who's indicated to us that there are funds available to change some of the vendors, provided that we can coordinate that with the food service providers. And the thing I want to say, though, and I wish we had had the video to play, Warren, is that if you want elementary and middle school kids to eat carrots and to eat bananas and eat apples and eat them right down to the core, make that food available to them in the classroom, outside of the cafeteria. Because when they walk into the cafeteria, especially middle schoolers, it is a party. They're seeing their friends, and eating is not the number one priority at that point. So as we break down those barriers and we open up the policies of different schools, we're seeing a lot more consumption of fruit and vegetables.
Next question. Have you had any success getting students or school staff involved at the high school level? And do you have advice for folks that would like to try to do that?
I think you're going to find a certain group of students at the high school level who are doing projects and doing their community work, who are going to love this kind of a program. But, we have focused on middle schools and elementary schools because that's where all the waste is at this point. I mean, an elementary school student wastes about 47 pounds of food a year, middle schooler about 39 pounds, and a high schooler only 15 pounds. Not that that's a good thing, but it's much less.
One person has commented that on the Newark campus of Rutgers University, next year there will be a JBJ Soul Kitchen at a place you might not have expected, right there on the campus.
Cool.
Great.
So, okay. Someone else commented that the Bill Emerson Act just got a revamp in the latest edition of the Farm Bill.
That's good. That's the liability bill that Jim mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
People that are really thanking you and saying how important it is for the food insecure communities. Another person informs us that the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends that students get at least 20 minutes for lunch, but that means 20 minutes to actually sit down and eat, excluding time waiting in line or walking to and from the cafeteria. A request. I'm not sure if Alan Newton is here. I thought I saw his name. We have a request to save the chat and pass it along. Are you interested in working with the colleges?
Yes, sure. We'll work with anybody until we solve the global climate crisis and the hunger crisis. We're interested in helping and working.
Okay, so just wondering, we're getting a lot more thanks. Let's see if there's a final question down here.
We want to thank you guys for giving us the opportunity to share the work that we're doing, and we appreciate the comments that everybody's making.
Yeah, and we would love to work with the Master Gardeners in our schools, because we want to create the circular, the understanding of the circular economy for these students. And if they can see, food scraps going to compost, going to fresh strawberries in the garden, going to taste tests, then we've done our job.
Well, I want to thank you all. I'm just going to mention that at the end of this class, this webinar, you will see a pop-up survey, and we hope that you take it. If you blink and you miss it, anyone who signed on will also receive an email asking you to complete a very short survey. So again, I want to thank all the speakers and thank all the participants for attending this evening. And if in the future there are updates, we'll let you know.
Can I add a comment quickly?
Sure.
I used to belong to a health and wellness school committee, and I would think they would be the go-tos to initiate such programs in the schools that don't have them.
Well, we have been very fortunate to have been sponsored by the Rhode Island Healthy Schools Coalition, who does wellness, has wellness committees in most school districts. And so that has been a wonderful source for connecting us with schools.
I forwarded to say that the Rhode Island Department of Education should, I guess you can say, mandate that every school system have a health and wellness subcommittee.
Yeah.
I feel that's a good idea.
Yep, definitely.
Okay.
Well,
Thank
thank you all. I'm going to end the meeting now. Good evening.
See ya. Thanks.